Let's bring in former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. He's a U.S. Navy veteran who served in Afghanistan, also ran for president. Also with us, retired four-star Army General Stanley McChrystal. He's the former commander of U.S. and International Security Assistance Forces Afghanistan and the former commander of the nation's premier military counterterrorism force, the Joint Special Operations Command. He's also author of the book entitled Leaders, Myth and Reality.
Well, let's talk about leadership here, General. What do we need from not only our president, what do we need from our congressional leaders? What do we need from our governors? What do Americans need the most in the middle of this pandemic that has challenged us in a way that, my gosh, very few things have since the Second World War?
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me on. I'm not looking to the White House right now for too much leadership. I'm really looking for leadership more broadly across the country. One of the things generals learn is that battles are won by sergeants and captains and sometimes lieutenant colonels. And I think that's really our mayors in America now. You know, we have 1,400 mayors of cities with 30,000 or more people, like Mayor Pete was. That's the front line of the fight now. That's where connections have to occur. That's where we need to support their leadership, and that's where we need to build them into a network so they can support each other.
Mayor Buttigieg, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. You have a unique vantage point. Obviously, people came to know you as a presidential candidate, but of course, you were mayor of South Bend, Indiana, where you live. What does it look like on the ground there? Because I know a lot of people in this country will see another terrible gut punch of an unemployment number today and say 22 million people in the last 3 weeks have filed for unemployment and say, I can't go on like this. We do have to start to get back to work. We do have to start to open some of those shops that I'm sure are closed around South Bend. What do you say to those people who are hurting, not from the virus, but because they're not working?
Well, that's right. We spent the last decade getting back on our feet economically in this community, and so many cities and communities have a similar story, only to have this blow. Of course, General McChrystal is very much speaking my language when he points to the role that mayors on the ground play, whether it's my successor here on the ground in South Bend or mayors around the country that I have been speaking to who really are not waiting on the White House, not waiting for answers to come from there, but have to figure out how to get things done. And what we see right now is a situation where there is no date certain for when we can get back to some semblance of normal. What worries me is a false choice shaping up. We're seeing some politicians say, look, either we've got to accept more death and destruction, or the economic destruction will continue, so maybe we should just tolerate more loss of life and get through it, not recognizing that that's economic destructive too. And there's a way out. We don't have to choose between staying frozen forever or surrendering to allowing this virus to kill millions. The way out is to have massively increased testing and tracing of contacts. That's how you contain a pandemic like this. And what we're going to need in order to achieve that is not a centralized or top-down solution. It would be nice to have leadership from the White House, but at the end of the day, it's going to fall to communities, to health systems, public health officials, to mayors and others to work out how to distribute the tests and achieve that contact tracing.
General McChrystal, you've said during this crisis that we shouldn't be looking at this as 50 separate fights state by state, that it should be one American fight. Of course, the President of the United States had said, hey, some of these states, they should have had PPE, they should have had ventilators, they should have had their own testing system. So he has a different view of it than you do. How do you see it right now? Is it too late to turn this into one fight? Is it too late to have a national testing program, for example?
Willie, no, not at all. In fact, we should have done it before, but the next best time to do it is right now. This is going to last for a while. And if this goes away, if COVID-19, there will be other risks that challenge the nation. So the same sort of effort we need to make to link the communities, to pass information, to pass best practices, to pass expertise, to share equipment, to share capability, is what military forces have to do to survive and to win. Pete was part of a fusion cell in Afghanistan, and he's lived that. And so I think we've got to start building that right now, whether the White House supports it directly or not.
You know, Mayor Pete, this pandemic has once again revealed fault lines in our society along racial grounds, along economic grounds. It seems poor Americans, the truly disadvantaged, Black Americans more likely to get this than white Americans, poor Americans more likely to get this than wealthier Americans, the 1%. What do we do moving forward to learn once again the lessons of this pandemic and as it'll apply to our society as we move beyond the coronavirus?
You know, there are a lot of weaknesses and injustices and fissures that we've tolerated for far too long in this society. And I think it was Reverend Barber from North Carolina who put it best. This virus both reveals and exploits those weaknesses. And we're seeing it certainly when it comes to the disproportionate effect this is having on Black Americans, as you mentioned, lower income Americans. And look, this is not a question of the virus when it enters somebody's bloodstream, checking to see if they're poor or discriminating based on race. This is because of the structures in our country that have discriminated based on race and harmed people, whether it's being relegated by redlining to living in a neighborhood where there's less access to fresh food and over time developing hypertension, which if you have it, makes you more vulnerable to COVID-19 if you get it. Whether it's the fact that low income and Americans of color are more likely to have lived without health insurance. There are so many examples of things that are going on that really were not tolerable in the first place. But now this virus is revealing just how unsustainable they are. I'll give you one more example. You know, some Republicans were objecting to the direct aid moving through Congress for Americans to be able to get through this crisis in terms of cash benefit. And their objection was, if you were on unemployment with that kicker that they added, that might be more than you were making before in the workplace. But that level of unemployment, that was set based on what it takes to live. So if it's more than people were making, that's not an indication that the benefit was too generous. That's a benefit that people couldn't live on the poverty wages they were making. There is no going back to the old way, and it is neither possible nor, I think, desirable when we finally find our way out of this state of affairs to just try to turn back the clock and go to what we had before, because what we had before made millions of Americans vulnerable.
Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg and retired General Stanley McChrystal, thank you both for being on the show today.
And General, we hope you'll come back and talk to us about Boston and the good work you're going to be doing there.
Absolutely.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.